Hello, my friends. Back after a few weeks off. Sorry we did this at an odd time today. John's schedule is crazy. My schedule is crazy. But we're making it happen because I don't want to go 3 weeks without doing this. So, yeah. I know John is in mid-mix mode. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about SZA. We'll talk about all kinds of stuff. Everything's pretty chaotic. What's good? What's good? What's up, everybody? Good to see people. Grab John in a second here.
Hi, buddy.
Hi.
You mixing like crazy this week and last week? And
yes.
Feels like it's been going crazy for you, huh?
Feels great.
Yeah, man, I can tell you're happy.
I live for this. I live up all night mix sessions. I live for it. You can see my eyes are loving it. It's great.
That's great, man. Well, let's answer this first question because it's been versions of this have been asked before, but since you just were involved with the SZA record, congratulations!
Thank you.
I think it's going to be the #1 album. You got 4 on there. They sound great. I think I posted. I feel like I should post more when friends do things, but I usually just do it when things really pique my ear. And that low mix is fantastic. That first 808 comes in. It's like, ooh, it's got, it reminds me of, I think it's one of your favorite mixes too. One of my favorite mixes, which Drake has the amazing low end that comes in that we all love so much? Is it
Hotline
God's
Bling?
Plan?
Oh, God's Plan. Yes.
Yeah. It reminds me of that mix, but it feels more like a Jon Castelli mix because it's got an interesting saturation to it and it's got a whole thing happening. But congratulations on that. And maybe we can start with why do we've sort of alluded to projects in the past that we're both working on that we don't get to work on together because you mix something different than I don't know if we ever talked, it was the James Arthur album where you mixed some songs and Manny mixed some of my songs and then I mixed one of my songs all on the same album. So maybe you can just start and I'll just jump into it. Why do all these big pop projects have different mixers? What are the various reasons?
Well, the first reason is relationships with producers and mix engineers, and a lot of producers only use certain people. I only use Serpent. I work with Manny. I work with Spike. I work with John. I work with Tizio. Like, that's what people do, and I think that's cool. I wonder if the artist loses in this conversation, though. A lot of the times where cohesion, for example, let's just use SZA for the example because it's real time. I got to do the entirety of the Atmos mixing with Mike Miller, so I got to get stems from all the mixers as well. And there's a lack of cohesion on a lot of things that Dale Becker showed up for.
He mixed the whole thing, right?
Whole thing. And I did a listen down on release day at the gym while I was working out with AirPods in. And man, I know those stems. I know those mixes. Dale killed it. Dale is the answer, So I think at least if you have a mastering engineer that's coming in at the end to offer some cohesion. He was over here last night and we were talking about it with Rob Bissell, who's SZA's engineer and produced a bunch of the song, kind of, finishing the album. And Dale was just thinking vocally. How do we make a vocal continuity in the mastering approach? Maybe some more heavy-handed EQing so the vocal sits, and that's all. That's all that matters for someone like SZA. And I'll speak for myself. I only care about her vocal. So the fact that we have that 808 hitting and low, that was me just trying to flex because I just got a Lavery Gold and I'm trying to see what it can do with the sat, how to soft sat into that thing without using a clipper in the box and just like see how I can hit that more like I'm practicing what a new piece of gear can offer me. But the vocal is all that matters. And I'm actually super insecure about that vocal because it's got so much reverb on it. And that's how she wanted it. So, I actually love it where we got it because of that. But when you're thinking about an overall project with all these mixers, I just really want the vocal to be cohesive. So at least the mastering engineer can do that. I think it comes down to relationships. I think with certain artists like Kendrick, they tend to have one. A lot of artists do rely on one mixer to bring it all together. I'm in the process of mixing for an artist I'm a super fan of right now. I'm the only mixer on the project. This artist believes in continuity. I'm co-mixing it with the artist and engineer. He comes over every day. We're doing it together. Therefore, there's that thing we talked about with co-mixing when I did Khalid with Dennis Koziak. Like there's a through line from the engineering to the final product. There is a quality control that the engineer that has recorded the vocals throughout is offering us, while also offering me free reign to heavy lift on some things and to see where it goes. He'll rein me back in if I go too far. I think that would be great. If so-and-so producer wanted to use a mixer, maybe there's a way, besides obviously Serban being out in Virginia Beach, maybe there's a way to co-mix and be like, oh, well, I want Manny to touch this one, but like John's doing the album. You know, that would be a dream of mine. It's like, let's bring Manny in, but, you know, Tizio or Baines or me or Jeff Ellis is mixing the majority of an album. Like, what does it look like to co-mix? There's egos at play. There's legacy at play. There's a lot of moving parts with this, but be a dream of mine to like heavy-handedly like come across an album doing the majority of the records and get to co-mix one with Serban or something. It's like, oh man, like, what would we do in the room together?
Yeah. Well, so it sounds like so one of the main reasons you get different mixers, like you were saying, is the relationship with producers. It seems to me on some projects too, A&Rs have ideas, the label has ideas about who's going to mix different types of songs. There's certainly that conversation of this person's going to do these, whether it's up tempo or this kind of drums, this sort of thing, which I know you and I have talked about. We don't have to get into all the details because there's lots of sort of behind the scenes discussions about a lot of this stuff. But oftentimes there's a mixer that sort of gets prepaid on a project that comes in. And then I've had this happen sometimes when I'm producing, but I also want to mix with a new project or a new A&R, that if I don't say early in the process, like, I'm going to mix this one. I mean, unless you're going to have one of a couple of different people do it, like I'm going to mix it. There's a couple times in the past I've sort of forgotten to do that, and then they're like, cool, we're going to send it to our mixer, and I'm like, oh shit, okay, yes, because they have people lined up for a project, so that happens sometimes. I think we should refer to what you're talking about briefly as casting. Like sometimes producers, executive producers, or A&Rs, labels, heads of labels want to cast. They're like, oh, okay, well, this one has crazy low ends, and this is a Tizio record, like, this has no drums and it's acoustic guitar. This is a Castelli record. Like, this happens on a regular basis. I don't agree with this format, but I understand the desire to cast. And so-and-so is a better fit for this. This is a rock song. This has an overt compression style that maybe I don't do. So let's get this. I think that is fair. I think that one makes more sense to me than the producer relationship on everything. Though most of my work comes from producer relationships with friends. So I don't want to slight that fact. It's a bit of all that. I think, you know, you're this way, I'm this way. I think all of us are this way. You know, maybe there are some people who are like, no, I only do this one thing, but I think that's pretty rare. I think almost all of us who are at this level, whatever it is in the professional world, making records for money, that like we would like to think we can do a lot more than whatever we're known for, whatever people think we are. I mean, you know, I'm someone who's like, I've worked on EDM records and country records and heavy rock records, mixing them, producing them, writing them. Like, I've done bits of everything. And so it's funny as I've gone through my career to interact with people, you know, somebody who I knew from the rock world, and all of a sudden as a producer, and now I've like written a pop song, and they go, you wrote this? I didn't even know you did. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, you know, I think I can do almost anything, but it is interesting. I mean, we've talked about this before too. A lot of the reason that creatives get hired over and over is these long-term relationships of trust that, you know, an A&R who's worked with Serban or Manny for years and years and years, unless they think there's some reason that a different guy is going to get or girl, whoever, get a much better result, why would they not just pay the person with the budget they have that they know will get the job done? That's, you know, gets back to our conversation always about how do you come up in the world, is make great records with the people around you for a long time. Then as you all elevate, you all come up together. That's obviously frustrating to people at any level who are like, I can do as good as that person. Why am I not getting that gig? But it's an interesting thing. I mean, even today, shout out Dale Becker, who's gonna master a single of mine tonight. When I was talking to the label and delivering something, and they're like, I just assume we're using Dale because the last time I worked with them, I used Dale with the same label and same A&R, and they're like, great, we're going to send it to so and so, our mastering person. I'm like, this has to be delivered tomorrow at 9 a.m. So like by the end of the day, UK time, we're going to have to go to Dale because I trust him and he'll get it done today. And if we need a revision, he can get it done. Like I can't do a new person on one of my mixes and production. And like, but so this is why I said, no, we're using Dale. And by the way, there's a ton of other great mastering engineers, but Dale's the one who I've had do stuff recently, and I trust him, and so that's the reason I use him. It's not only because of the skill set, but it's because of the relationship. So I wanted to answer that question. People are asking about different mixers, and I agree with you in a lot of ways too. Where, you know, a big thing as a fan of music, I like to hear projects that feel like an artist being cohesive, and a mixer can definitely help that. Yes. But as you said, probably the most important thing, especially when I've worked with artists across projects, and they're like, I don't know, is this going to fit with the other things? It's like the vocal and the personality is the thing that makes it different. So if you get the vocal right, then you're obviously the songs as well. But like if you get the vocal right on the sonics, that's getting there. So it's interesting you say that about this album. Did you do different things on these different 4 songs vocally? I know there was several people in the Discord that were like, what's the reverb he used on Low? We love the reverb. It's funny how you were like, I'm a little insecure because there's so much reverb. What was it? Their printed reverb? Did you add stuff? How did you? Did
for the first time in a while, just because of how fast we had to move. This all happened within like 48 hours, and then the Atmos took about 4 days because we did 23 songs in 4 days. But the 4 songs I was working on stereo, I think all happened within 48 hours, all at like 3 a.m. And I left Rob's sessions as is when it came to the vocal chain on her. So one of my first times in a long time, just letting the chain be what the chain was and tweaking it a little bit or leaving it and working from there, not committing a stem just in case. The reverb, shit, what did he use? I don't know. I can go open it. But the thing that's key
it was a big question. People really want to know what that reverb is. They love how it sounded.
Let's go find out. Let's go find out. But what I want to say about it is, because this is how to make myself feel good about it, knowing that this is what she wanted. Her reference was Don Toliver. She wanted, and I got to mix a record with Don Toliver on it, and that reverb was printed on his stem. So I didn't have access to that reverb for him because his engineer took care of that. But when it came down to SZA wanting that style, I was like, okay, but how do I keep her up front but warm? She likes to be warm. She doesn't want to be harsh. She doesn't like high mids in her voice. So to get Don Toliver or Travis Scott to cut through that, they have a lot of high mid presence in the vocal. So that just cuts through anything. Now it's different when you're like, when you want to be warm bodied and full, that's going to make the reverbs muddy. So actually it went really deep into using the new stabilizer plugin I've been talking about a lot from Ozone. From Isotope in Ozone.
In the Ozone.
Yeah,
it's their version of Soothe.
Yes, it's their version of Soothe. And I let it go like almost 100% on the reverb. And it was controlling these overtones on the verb only, letting the dry signal stay forward. The overtones that were causing too much
that's a cool
into the verb.
trick.
It was a cool trick. I like it a lot. I also did some EQ, but mostly just that. And then what I would do was either saturate or limit after that. So you're controlling all those overtones and you're adding back the density with a limiter and pushing it forward. So it's even.
See if I can like recap that a little bit. So oftentimes, I think we run into this a lot where when you get a really full, loud reverb coming off a vocal, all of the clarity in the vocal are oftentimes these particular frequencies that are poking out. Sometimes you'll get 4K, sometimes you'll get resonances in 1K, sometimes you'll get high SE, 8K plus. You get these frequencies that when they hit the reverb, they kind of overwhelm the whole stereo field and the depth, and it gets hard to make it a really reverby sounding vocal because all of a sudden the clarity of the vocal goes away when you have those same frequencies bouncing around. So you're talking about using something, in this case, the stabilizer from Isotope and Ozone, something like Soothe, where you basically are automatically using their algorithm to soften all those pokey things only in the reverb so that you can then have it come up and the vocal's still very clear.
Exactly.
And oftentimes the simple way to do this with the reverb is you high pass or you low pass, and that often gets the job done. But if you're having a really loud reverb, this is a different kind of technique for it.
Yes, and I was just looking. So it's Valhalla in the now setting at like 2 seconds, whatever, if anybody cares.
Yeah.
With nothing below, I EQ'd probably everything below 400 out and above like 8K, and then stabilizer, and then I put a tube saturator after it to recharacterize
a little more density in it.
Yeah, so that's what I did to that.
That's cool. Yeah, there are a lot of of people talking about that sound. And of course, somebody said on the Discord, which or on the comments here, which I think is totally great. One of the reasons it sounds so good is it forced you out of your comfort zone, and you had to use your tools and go, all right, how do I make this sound? She loves this. I wouldn't normally do this. Now, how do I make it work? And you make a gorgeous sound because of it.
There is a CLA 3A on that chain, and I left it. I have not left a Waves plugin, definitely not a CLA, on in a long time, if ever. And I left it on because it was doing something. I bypassed it. It wasn't as cool. I had to deliver this mix in an hour. I'm going to leave it on. So I didn't commit stems. I'm looking at this like little altar boy on blending in some like high formatted stuff on her. I didn't want to commit all that stuff as is. So it definitely is tweaking from Rob's, which is different. And then I'm having a vocal bus that's my treatment that's kind of doing an overall thing from where his was at. So definitely a different style for me. I love being out of the comfort zone.
Yeah. So you love the Waves CLA plugins.
Favorite plugin. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And anything on the particular 4 songs, difference between them? Were they all the same producer, same vocal sounds, different stuff on different things?
All different producers, all different vocal sounds. The used beat with Don Toliver on it, she wanted that to feel like her first demo, and even the track itself, even the session that I got didn't sound like the first demo. So I was A-Bing how to make it sound like a demo, but also make it sound like a finished record, because I think the first pass to Rob is like gatekeeper, right? So he's QCing before he sends on to SZA, just, for many reasons, obviously. With 23 songs, you don't want to just bombard her. She's like, getting ready for SNL while this is all happening. And he was like, I think she's going to want to, this sounds like a great, like I pitched the drums down 4 semitones, like made it sound less tinny, and like dropped down the low end, added a bass octave to it that it wasn't in there. Tried to make it sound more like a record, because I knew he was told me this was a demo, and I didn't even know if it was going to make the record. So I was like, oh, let me put producer hat on, and he's like, yo, this record sounds great. She's not going to like it. Okay, cool. Let me start over. Went back to how it was. It was hurting my ears the whole time I was working on it. I just turned the speakers down a little bit to leave it alone. And then I wound up finding a happy medium on how to, okay, it sounds like a demo. I like it. Maybe like the 2 tracks should just feel like a 2-track, but I want a little bit more of the bass and the balance. Like I turned up all these synths in it, and it was starting to feel like more soundscapey. Like there's some weird just improv synth lines in the back of that record that you can't hear, because she kept saying, hey, can he turn down the synths? It's like, damn, but the synths are magic. Like Dahi produced this, and there's some magic shit going on in the back, and I jacked all of it up, and she didn't want it. It's like, back down. Like, all right, cool. But she kept saying, thankfully, in all the versions we did, the vocal sounds great though. Vocal sounds great. So she would reinforce that something sounds great. And how do we get that demo back? The demo feel, while it can sound expensive and finished. That was an interesting one for me, because
which song is this?
It's called Used, featuring Don Toliver.
Can I just say, as like a meta thing for people watching, how Jon is talking about this? He's talking about demoitis right now, and people talk about demoitis as this awful thing. And it's a topic we've gone on before, but this is exactly why Jon Castelli is a professional. He's not going, yeah, but I can make it sound so much better, and she wants it to sound like the demo. No, this is what you do as a music professional. She's not going, oh, I'm married to the demo, I don't know what I'm doing. It's fucking SZA. She knows what she's doing. She knows how she wants it to sound.
She does.
And Jon goes, here's all the ways I can make it sound bigger and better. And they're like, nope, going back. And Jon's like, great. I'm going to figure out how to make the vocal sound great, get it back to how she's excited about it. Even these amazing synths from this amazing producer, she's used to it being low, and that's the thing that she wants artistically. And you get it done, and you're not sitting there complaining about it. You get it done. You achieve the vision. I think it's a really important thing, because we all get frustrated at times in our lives about demoitis, because we can make it so much better and we can make it so much more this. But that's not what we're there to do. We're there to achieve a vision. And hopefully we don't all get to work with SZA every other day, but like that level of artist to your friends that you're making records with, like there's something about an artist feeling what they're doing that should, for the most part, supersede everything else that we're doing. Everything else. So the fact that you do that is great.
This is how I love what you just said, because this is how the conversation goes otherwise. yeah, great mix. She's not going to like it like that. Fuck you then. And then she goes, okay, we'll use the demo mix. You know, we have the wave file of that mix. And then Jon Castelli goes, oh man, I didn't get a SZA record. Like, that's the other version of the story. So do I want to be prideful over what I think is better? I think what came out is right for the record because SZA chose it to be right for the record. I think that's what you're saying.
And the actual most likely version is you're just a little complainy and you're a little whatever and you get it done. And, you know, there's 5 other mixers on this album, and the next time they don't call you.
Exactly.
You don't really know why, or you're like, why didn't they? But the fact that you're like, yeah, let's get it there. I tried some stuff, but let's get your vision. Like,
my favorite part about all of this was the communication with Rob, because Rob is so polite, and he's in the 11th inning on this album, and he's, you know, do you mind doing another pass? Like, she's not going to like this. Do you want to do another one? He's giving me the opportunity to even be like, nah, maybe not me. You know, I could back out. I don't have to do it. I already had Low, and I love Low. I could have been like, nah, it's not for me. But it is for me. What is for me is serving the artist. It is. That's what I want to do. So that's next year for me. I'm like, we have a lot to talk about today, because, you know, I think I briefly touched on a couple of weeks ago when we were on, I might be a little bit less like open to being so forward and discussing things with you on, and just for the record, and these other platforms that I've been doing, just because like I keep talking about things out loud and people just assume that's what I'm actually doing. Like, I have so many compressors on SZA's records because like it was either there or it needed it. And I'm having like, next year is whatever the record needs. That's how I've always been, but I don't talk about things that way. I talk about what I think records could sound like, and I philosophize with you out loud, and then I change my approach. I go in heavy-handed into the approach that I'm talking about, and then I take bits and pieces of what works, and then I do other things that I forget to talk about, right? And I think maybe I need a second to just go make records sound like they need to sound. Like, if it was up to me, my first pass of Low was very vocally dry, and I didn't hear back. This is a good point to try to make here with all of this conversation that people love the Verb and I'm insecure about it. The common thread that you're asking for the 4 songs is, holy shit, there's so much Verb. I don't know if I like this, and I don't know if she's going to like it either, right? That was the common thread of my thought process and my anxiety. When I sent that first mix, basically it was Saturday night. I was cooking for 6 hours. I think Niku posted a reel that I reposted because I was literally cooking for 6 hours. And then I got a call when I was about to plate us the pasta. We were going to have a chill Saturday night. And Rob was like, yo, can you get on a mix right now? And it was Low. And I was like, of course. Like, Josh is prepping it. I'm eating the pasta. I spent 6 hours making a ragu. And Josh is prepping it. And I jump on that mix. The first version he wants within an hour. So by the time it was ready for me, I was so in my head about it, but I was like, SZA should have less reverb. I want this record to hit. And so I sent it back, and he liked where it was at, right? He was down. He didn't ask for any more verb on this first pass. Sent it. I'm on the couch, like, waiting to hear back. Nothing from her. And I'm like, no, first opportunity at SZA. And she's like, not gonna fuck with this mix. You know, Rob's like, I don't know if we're gonna hear back from her tonight. She's usually up, but she's in New York, so who knows? I don't think we heard back that night, or whatever it was like 6 a.m. I just stayed up all night waiting because I couldn't sleep. I was so anxious. Yeah. And he sent me a screenshot, which was like, yo, this Low beat is crazy. And Rob was like, in a good way, in a bad way, question mark. She goes, no, fire emoji. And I was like, yes. So he sent me that. So I was like, okay, SZA likes the way that this sounds. But then all the notes kind of kept going, like, can we get some of the Verb back? I don't think we had any beat mix notes. It was all, can we get more Don Toliver Verb feeling? And then that's when I was like, okay, that's why I'm really insecure about this, because I sent it back. It resonated with her in order to give me, I got 3 more mixes because of that mix. Obviously, we know the end of the story. But there was confidence in her that I was a good fit for the songs, but she didn't love how dry the vocal was yet. How do we get it there, and how do I feel comfortable with it? To this day, I still feel a little insecure about it, but there's something magical about the space that the vocal takes up because of that Verb that I'm just going to have to live with every time I press play. I'm still like, oh, it's a little too much, but I like it. and I understand why it works. And it's cool that people in the Discord are commenting on it. I've had a couple of friends that are producers text me being like, yo, I love the low end that people are talking about. That vocal though sounds tight. Like that sounds new. That sounds different on a beat like that. And that's what I was going for. I was like, how do I make it feel different than just like a swampy verb on SZA with hard 808s? That doesn't work in my brain as something interesting. So I think that was the feeling, was like, how do we get it there? And that's what I'm the most insecure about.
Well, everybody seems to love it. I want
to be insecure about things. I want to be insecure about things moving forward because that's how I feel I get better. Yeah. And I think part of my reason for pushing back on the desire to talk out loud as much as I do, not saying I'm not going to do it, just maybe in a different sense, and we can talk about what that looks like next year. But I think I spent a lot of this year figuring out approaches like that I want to take, and next year I want to fuck all approaches, and the approach is what's on the screen. It's what's coming out of the speakers. That is the approach. I don't have to make an approach at it. I don't even want to use that word anymore because I was using that word a lot. Like, this is my approach. The first pass is mine. It's like, it is. Spike Stent's first pass is his, but he's also listening to the record, and that's why he's so good. That's why Serban is so good. And not that they're the best mixers sonically on every record. I would push back on that, even though I'm their biggest fans in a lot of ways. I think they're the best because they're client whisperers. They give the artist what they want 9 out of 10 times.
It's what you're talking about with what you did with the Dahi record with SZA, which is get it to where the artist fucking loves it.
That's it.
Yeah, and be frictionless on the way there. It's a tough thing for all of us because we all come into, you can't really get successful in music without some amount of relentless ego. I mean, we've talked about this before where, it's like the people who are successful in music, basically everybody that I know has made decisions that, a guidance counselor would say is insane. And we do this thing in the face of a lot of reasons not to do it. And a lot of practical and financial and emotional and relationship reasons. We just go, we got to do this because I feel like I can do this thing and I want to do it. And whatever it is, whether it's an expression of like ego, like I'm so great, or just ego, whatever I'm thinking is so important. I need to do this. I don't care about these other things. And then at some point, you really have to figure out if you want longevity in this industry and want to work with people for a long time, you have to learn how to soften that thing of like, I know exactly how it's supposed to be. I mean, not everybody has to. You can be Phil Spector, but sometimes you pull out a gun, you end up in jail and whatever. Like, there are those people, but it's actually a really small percentage. The vast majority of people who have really long careers are people that figure out how to be easy to work with. They do great work, but it's like, let me adapt, let me adjust, let me make things, let me evolve, and getting out of the like, this is the way I do things, it's my way or the highway. And not to say I'm like that or you're like that, but we all have that tendency of like, I really wish it was like this and people did it like this. But, if you approach things that way, then you're going to be whatever that narrow lane is, that's what you're going to be doing forever. And if people like it, then they like it. And anybody who's outside of that, you're not going to get hired.
Yeah, there was a conversation that came up at this last Just for the Record live roundtable thing that I found really interesting, and I pushed back against it because it was a positive towards me, and I'm trying to see the other side. Like, there are certain young people, youngish people that are coming up as engineers, as producers, and I think this is more effective as a producer. The idea of being a sonic disruptor or something, that was the term. It's like, no. You'll break an album sonically, and then people will want the thing because that's what you do. I don't see that as the future of mixing I don't think there will be this Mount Rushmore of mix engineers as there has been for the last 3 or 4 decades. I think it will be the engineers that are recording, that are working with the producers, using their mixes, sometimes bringing on so-and-so to do a single, maybe co-mixing the album. We've talked about this. I don't know if I want to be a disruptor or just someone that understands how to finish records the way that they need to be finished. Yeah. I think that with the least friction possible, I maybe could be, and I can stamp down on what I think my sound is. I think I can do that. I think I could be that person. I don't think I want to be that person. So I think it's cool that maybe some people that I hold in high regard think that that should be my path or could be my path. That's very valuable to me to sit on and reflect over the holidays and break. But I don't know if I want to be a disruptor. I think I want to work. I want to work hard, and I want to work for people that want me to work with them. And that's really the priority when it comes down to it, not to put my sonic stamp on things. It's not.
Well, so much of,
I think it used to be. I think it was.
Well, the role of the mix engineer is changing more and more because so much more of the sonic architecture and the sound design is done before it gets to the mixer. And the role of the mixer is really, what the roles are called. I think we talked about this with, I talked about this with Rory a few weeks ago when we had our mastering, which was just one of my favorite conversations. I love that guy. We need to talk to him more in my life. You already know. I know. You guys are very close. But the role of the mixing engineer is not what it was when it was Chris Lord-Alge and those sort of guys, where you really need to take it to a mixer in order to have a finished sounding record. These days, things can get very close to finished sounding or get finished by a producer. And the question is, can we then take it to a mixer and they will make some of those adjustments to really give that last 5, 3, sometimes 1% of just like, now it feels finished. And so the idea that you're going to take somebody's track who is an A-level producer who spent tons of time on the sonics and getting all the things right, and then you're going to drastically change it and put your stamp on it, is just not a role that people really want anymore. I think you obviously are a very capable producer, and you used to do more of that. You talked about this maybe it was last year or 2 years ago. I feel like we've been doing this for like 10 years now. But at some point you were talking about maybe doing more engineering. I think that's a place you could definitely make a sonic impact if you decide, I'm going to go pull out my ribbon mics and record a thing at the gift shop, and then I'm going to mix it as a part of the sonic process earlier in the process, such as a part of the sound design. I think you could definitely make an impact that way. But as a mixer who's getting very close to finished stems, it's a different role than how we grew up knowing what a mixer is. Yeah. And it's an interesting topic that I think we'll continue. I
completely agree. That being said, I do feel, going back to Low as the example, that rough mix did not hit like the way that this mix hits. So I definitely feel like I did my job. It doesn't feel like a different record, but it hits deeper and harder and more emotionally than the rough, right? So that's my job. My job is to improve it, whether it's 5%, 10%, 50%. But I didn't reshape the sound of the 808. I actually don't even think there's a plugin on the 808. I just turned it up into the Lavery just to see what it could do. I think I tried boosting low end on it and I didn't like it. Like, I don't think I think maybe it could be another song I'm working on that I did this, but one of the two songs come to mind that one of them like wanted a little bit more low end to fill out the length of it. And one I just jacked up into the converter and clipped the converter. And then that creates, like, Alex Toomey has talked about this, and people have talked about like setting the gain structure for an 808 record like that by getting the 808 to hit right and then finding the place for the vocal. And that's what I did. That was a technique that I tried for that record. And then when the kick comes in, just find a way to make the kick smack, but it's more of an 808 record than a kick record. But that dynamic shift when the actual short kick comes in has to feel like something. But I felt like I did my job, and I'm proud of that mix.
Yeah, it's very much
for what my job was entailed.
Yeah, your job is to do what is necessary to make it sound finished. So it's sort of the difference between can and should. You can do all kinds of things to make it all kinds of ways, but what you should do is whatever's necessary for that particular song. And that's when it's like, all right, I have to do some heavy lifting to get it right on this song. And this one, I actually have to undo some stuff so it sounds more like what they wanted from the demo, and it's gone away from that. So I actually have to like help them revert back to initial version.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just...
That's ear training.
Yeah, everything sounds great. And maybe I would make a slightly different decision on the drums, but they're really happy with it, so I'm going to make the vocal sound great. Or they love this reverb and I would do a different thing, but so how do I make this reverb the best version of the thing that they want? And that's what you do as a mixer.
Like the same week, I mixed something that our friend Circuit produced, And his mix sounded like they could have put that out. I think vocally speaking, I don't want to name the art.
Good.
He's so good. I mean, Circuit's like the best in the game. Like now, I think my vocal makes the artist that hopefully I can't wait to talk about, because it's one of my favorite people to work on, sounds a bit more like a star in the approach that I took on the vocal. But if his mix came out, I'm not sure that it wouldn't have the success that hopefully it will have. But I'm so thrilled to be a part of it. And I do think my mix is better, but marginally. And I would shout out Circuit all day for how his mix sounded. I think my analog, the hybrid mix bus added some depth and some width and a bit more expensive sound that makes it feel like a finished pop hit record. I think his sounded a little more in the box and a little demo-y, quote unquote. But the glass was pretty full before I got the pitcher out of the fridge,
Don't people watching, don't tell Circuit I told you to do this, but send him a DM or a comment or something. Tell him to come on one of these lives. And I've flirted with the idea a couple of times. He rarely does things like this, but I know he was an early.
But I want to talk about how important it is to recognize when that person is producing, when that engineer is on the record before you're touching it, to know that they like it. They like it a lot. I like what Circuit does a lot. I don't want to mess with what Circuit does a lot.
They're not waiting for it to get to you to make it sound great. They do a great job. And then if you can find other little bits of room or make it cohere to the rest of things or whatever it is, and this is the value of experience is understanding what is right for each song in each moment, and what your role is in this particular mix.
I think one thing that will still translate for me through the next few years as I find out whatever this version of me as a mixer looks like, doing less, I still consider myself an unmixer. I still consider myself someone that loosens up. That's loosens up the feel, the way things feel, and maybe decouples a few sounds to create some sort of separation in space, just a little bit, so it doesn't unglue, but it starts to take on a different character of groove that I feel like that's inherent in the performance and less clamped. Like that's what I would say the song that I'm talking about now that Circuit produced, I would say that it sounds a little clamped down on with a limiter at the end versus a little bit of a thoughtful way of getting it to be as loud as he had it. And then it just let the guitars, it's a guitar and vocal song. It just let the guitars groove a little harder, feel a little bit more realistic. And then when the bass comes in, you can have more impact because the bass isn't hitting a limiter. Now there's space for the bass to have low end. And that was one of the notes. It's like, hey, I don't think I nailed from him. Like, I don't know if I nailed like the way that the bass comes in on verse 2. Oh, well, I know why that's not happening. Like, so let me do that. And unmixing a little bit to create some space for grooves to feel like what they were, and having the vocal jump out of the speakers instead of just being so contained. I think that's my role. Is this sounds almost done, but it sounds a little overcooked to me. How do we just make it feel a little bit more realistic while keeping that same loudness, that same aggression, and not have Castelli try to warm it up too much like he normally would want to do. Like, let's let it be harsh in the right areas if it needs to be. Let's not make it quieter because he thinks it has to be. Like all the things that I've said so many times, right? You know what I mean?
You're thinking a lot about this, yeah.
Although the low mix, it's funny you talk about God's Plan. God's Plan is one of my favorite mixes because it is a quiet LUFS mix. It's -12, and it translates everywhere. Low was -11 when I delivered it, and Dale turned it up a dB, he told me. So like it's a -10 mix, and it goes for a reason. So I still think there's, like, mathematically speaking, there is a specific LUFS that works really well for low end of that style that I think will always win. But if that's not where the rough mix was and how it felt, and that's where people want it to be closer to what they had, who am I to say it needs to be like that? Sometimes you win.
Yeah,
sometimes you
totally
don't.
Agree. And I will make one little comment on your declaration of being an unmixer. You're an unmixer when it's right to be an unmixer, and I think that's a function of what we talked about before, which is that these days everybody can make things sound bright and loud, and people that are not either inexperienced or just mostly producing and writing, like me oftentimes, will make things bright and loud, but sometimes clarity gets sacrificed a little bit. So when things get sent to someone like you go, great, here's the intention of it. It's bright and loud. I'm going to reconstruct it a little bit so it's still bright and loud, but you know, things are clear or
Yes.
in their correct space or whatever. And I think, you know, oftentimes what that means is it's probably going to sound better, not quite as loud, but that's the dance that you do as a mixer, which is people don't want to hear things necessarily super quiet compared to what they had, and how you negotiate those things. This is what makes us professionals, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, what you're talking about is listening and understanding intention. That's a theme we go back to, you and I and a lot of my friends all the time. Is the intention to really have an acoustic song be -4? No, I think the intention is to have an acoustic record feel like a radio hit song and not some like Bob Dylan warm, quiet, noisy record. I think if someone is slamming an acoustic record, they're going for a certain thing with that kind of record that it can hang next to a bright other pop, fully produced out, dense arrangement, but it happens to just be a vocal and a guitar or a piano and guitar. Just they smash it because they want it to sound familiar next to other things like that. So how do we find that familiarity while allowing there to be some sort of dynamic shift that lets this song feel more like a classic record? And I think that there is a happy medium. That's the record I'm talking about that Circuit produced. I think when I got the notes from Omer, it was, who would they go? Were they going for Bob? It was like some sort of Bob Dylan meets Today. I was like, oh, I get that reference. Like, can we warm it up a little bit and a little bit less reverb on the vocal now? Like, and once I got that note, it took a turn into what the record should feel like, but I maintained the exact loudness. I just shifted things a little differently, and that's collaboration. But I didn't make it quieter for the sake of being quieter. I just had the loudness come from a different area. And I love where it turned out, but I'm not pissed that it's -8, -7. I don't care. I would care last year that an acoustic song is -7, -8.
Well, I know you have a hard out at 2, so maybe we can bang through a few questions. This is one that I actually thought about, and I think I maybe told you I didn't. I'm renting a house in LA for a few months, has a studio in it. I'll be down right after Christmas. Yeah, so you'll have to come by. Did I tell you there's a plate and a BX15 and a BX10, which apparently sound wildly different. So I'm going to be going through this a bunch, and I'm going to have a lot of fun with those. And come on over, let's have some fun.
I would love to. I've never heard them in real life, actually.
Well, from my understanding is that basically every BX10 sounds different from every other BX10.
Okay.
I haven't listened to things side by side, but my friend renting the place from, he said he was looking for a BX10, found a BX15, bought it, and then found a BX10, and they sounded so different. He's like, I'll just keep them both. So all these outboard interesting reverbs. There's various reverb questions that stemmed off of the SZA thing. You answered that song specifically, that low, and how you got that. What about, how do you decide hall versus chamber versus plate versus other things? How do you decide which style of reverb to use? Because there's tail and there's EQ and that sort of thing. I know you have some of your favorite presets. You like the Seventh Heaven Sunset Chamber. How do you get into the different kinds of reverbs? How do you decide those things? You just kind of go for it?
My answer, I don't know, and I've never thought about this ever.
me neither. That's why I want you to teach me shit. Honestly, here's what I do. I cycle through them, and I do the one that sounds good.
Yeah.
Spring reverb sound very different.
Yeah.
Reverbs are their own thing. I don't use a lot of plate. I generally don't like how plate blends into contemporary mixes. I use it when it's very simple or like a piano and vocal. I'll play with that sometimes. Generally, I'm using halls and chambers. And I kind of just, I've got the Seventh Heaven. I actually really like the Reverb. There's a couple of those presets I like. Valhalla, when you get off the main preset, although that's a nice sound, it's just in every record. There's some interesting stuff there. I don't use the Valhalla plate, but I'm mostly just playing around with chambers and halls until I find a thing I like. I have some chains, but I haven't gone deep into it.
Let's jump back to 30 minutes ago when we asked what between the 4 songs I mixed for SZA, is a through line, and it's my insecurity on reverb. So I have a hard time with reverb. I like like I said, the Sunset Chamber is my go-to for a vocal space. I've been really liking.
That's a preset on the Seventh Heaven, which is
it's a Bricasti though. It's a classic Bricasti preset, the Sunset Chamber, okay. And that I love. But I haven't been using it very often, so that would be the go-to. But I also like Megaverb from Goodhertz. It's aggressive. Yeah. You can shape really interesting spaces with it. I like to make my own. I used to use Pro R a lot from FabFilter, and on the album I'm doing now, the engineer that's on it uses Pro R, so I've been using that on this project. I like springs. I really like the in Altiverb, the ARP 2600 spring is classic, and it sounds really good on drums and vocal. It's very cool. I've been messing with that.
I really like spring on mono sound.
Yes,
spring because it adds so much like extra character to it, like a mono guitar that's going to sit here having a mono spring reverb. I mean, that's the sound of like a guitar amp. Obviously, like you can build into a guitar sound, but even like a direct sound or whatever, a mono background vocals. These things sound very cool with an equally directional mono reverb.
Or yeah, you could do the dry on one side and the wet on the other. Very cool sound, very Cyndi Lauper-esque sound. I really like the AMS RMX16 digital reverb. I love the ambience in that and the non-lin. Spider, we used to do this a lot. A mono spring into a stereo plate is a great kind of dusty verb sound. And you set the pre-delay right, you kind of get this like bouquet that blossoms out into a nice dusty warm stereo plate thing. That's actually, I forgot, we used to do that a lot, him and I, on things.
The main challenge I have with reverb is that if you start to get fancy with it, it just takes up a lot of space. Which is actually interesting what you're saying about the SZA low vocal that you just used the stabilizer to just even it out, because that's what happens when you start using reverbs with lots of character. Unless you have a lot of space in the arrangement, things just start to get real muddy and no pun intended, but convoluted.
Yeah.
Nice. It's like, no, it's just the word I thought of.
I know.
But it's things get messy very quickly. So I don't know. Maybe there's some reverb experts maybe on the Discord that can teach me about reverb.
Yeah. if it were up to me, pop music would have very little reverb, just because I want to hear the artist vulnerable and dry and focused. I do understand the argument that people are talking about that verbs and effects are flavor. And like, Prince without reverb wouldn't be Prince, and without chorus effects. And,
except, I was just thinking Kiss is like my favorite record ever, and it's like super, super dry.
Super dry. You're right. There are versions of it. Good point. That's a good point. I mean, Freddie Mercury had a lot of chorus and short verbs, and like the effects are part of certain artists' records. So I get that. But I prefer to lean dry. But maybe that's an insecurity of mine about never thinking that my reverb choices are correct. Maybe I'm not. I actually want to ask Rob. I meant to ask him last night.
I'm with you on that. Like, I always feel like the reverb is like, this is too much. What's going on?
Yeah. I wanted to ask Rob, and I'm going to text him after this because he was over my house last night, and I meant to ask him. I want to know what the reverb is on the chorus of Blind on SZA's record, because it goes to this crazy short metallic thing. I'm going to text him after this because I really want to know what that reverb is. It was the first time I was surprised by a reverb that was bold and made me want to know what it was. So I'm going to find that out.
Cool. Let's try to grab a couple more before you got to run. Somebody asked about mixing in Ableton. I'm actually delivering my first fully mixed in Ableton song to Dale in a few hours.
Wow.
So when that comes out, I'll tag it. Just sort of happened. I made the track there. I did mix the vocals and comp things in Pro Tools, but then just moved it because the production kept changing. So I just mixed the vocals. Honestly, it feels like probably what it's like to co-mix, where I'm co-mixing with myself. Yeah. Where I had the vocals dialed in Pro Tools, then I pulled my vocal mix into Ableton and went from there. Let's see. Somebody asked about, Aaron asked about, is hissing noise inherent in Coles or similar mics? Is there a way to remove it? Cloud Lifter not working. People have to understand, I think a lot of young record makers didn't come up in studios knowing about ribbon mics. Ribbon mics are just very, very low output. And so if you don't have a high impedance, clean preamp, they're going to be very noisy. I mean, they're going to be very noisy anyway. Oftentimes, if you're doing a very quiet sound, but kind of like an SM7, different kind of mic, but in the sense that they need a shitload of gain to get up to the place where they sound good. So a lot of times, and I think, I'm actually not sure, like electronically what a cloud lifter does, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't. It's not going to eliminate hiss. It just makes it. So
it adds clean gain.
Yeah, so you don't have to put the preamp as loud. So if you don't have a high quality, clean preamp, if you crank your preamp up all the way, you may be getting extra noise from the sound of the preamp. But if you have a super mic. Yes, but if you have a super clean preamp with a high impedance, that's kind of the best you're going to do. But you still might have some hiss because Coles and other ribbon mics, RCA, AAA mics are very low.
So worth it though.
I totally agree. But if you're doing like a soft acoustic guitar or a soft vocal into a ribbon mic, and then you want to compress the shit out of it, it's going to be noisy. Yeah, that's kind of it's the one downside of ribbon mics. They're a little fragile, so you don't want to put one in front of a kick drum or a bass amp.
I have to say, Isotope has nailed the denoiser live on Ozone 10.
Yeah.
Isotope's RX10 denoiser plugin is really good.
I've been hearing good things. There's been lots of discussion in the Discord about how great the newest Isotope RX is.
It works really well. I don't notice like high-end degradation like I used to on the earlier ones. And if so,
that's always the challenge with those, is that you lose high-end by using these automatic noise suppressor denoisers, not noise suppressor, denoisers. Yeah. They eat up high-end, and you kind of don't notice it because you're like, oh, all the hiss is gone, but then it doesn't have the same airy brightness. And
maybe this is a good thing. Maybe we need less bright vocals, and that's why I like it. But no, I've noticed that the high-end stays. You got to be subtle with the threshold and the reduction amount, but it sounds really good. I had to use it on something that was aggressively noisy, and it worked really well.
One thing I also want to say with ribbon mics is that I don't want to get into a long discussion about impedance and what it is, mostly because I don't really know. I mean, I'm not an electrical engineer. I know enough to know that higher impedance for ribbon mics are basically set up with a different impedance depending on what kind of mic they are and what the manufacturers. I think actually impedance changes along the frequency spectrum, but the essential thing is if you have a Coles and you're plugging it into your little USB preamp, that may not have the ideal impedance for the ribbon mic, and therefore it might be much lower output and then much noisier. This is why I love the Undertone Audio stuff. They have an impedance switch on them, so you can raise the impedance for ribbon mics and things like that. So people asking about ribbon mics, do a little Googling on impedance. I think that will be helpful.
Yep.
Maybe we grab one more.
Yes.
Well, man, this is too long of a topic. I like Will's question. What's your year-end chat with Dale going to be about for 2023? Maybe we save that for next week. Yeah. Because you sort of talked about it a little bit, but I know you're selling some gear.
I'll have it, and then we'll have the conversation on Tuesday before I leave Wednesday for the new year.
That sounds great. Yeah. By the way, are you out of town for New Year's?
I'm going to go to Christmas with my family, and then London with girlfriend. For New Year's Eve. I want to go to Noble Rot Wine Bar, which is my favorite wine bar. So
nice. Okay. Let's see. Oh, somebody asked, Dave asked, any value in console mixing in 2022? Manny seems to, I guess Manny is console mixing. That's the implication. My general view of that is whatever works. You're not going to get better results out of a console. I know that Baines does some outboard summing. It adds a little bit of character to help separation, but it's also adding a little bit of harmonic distortion. Don't think you need it. Don't think it's bad or particularly good.
Very uninterested in the topic. If you like it and you think it makes you mix faster and more like you want things to sound with a character, then use it. You don't have to invest in it.
Yeah, I think we are almost in a, I don't know how to put this, like a post what's the right tool world. Everybody's got the ability, everybody's got the same tools. You know, obviously plugins cost money, but I don't think there are things that the average person can't achieve. I think we was talking about it with Rory a few weeks ago on the mastering thing. He's like, I could master records with Pro Q3 and my speakers. And maybe a compressor or the Fab Filter limiter. I have all this other stuff and I use it sometimes and I know what it all does, but it's really a lot of the job now is really just the expertise. So if what you do in your process is you like analog summing and you like that process, or you like how it sounds or whatever, go for it. Very few people use it. I think younger, newer people it'll probably be essentially completely phased out because there's no reason to have it technically.
It's in there.
Hey, look, we got 2 minutes to spare. I know you got a hard out at 2, so it's perfect.
Yeah, I do. I gotta go.
God, you gotta go mix.
I go mix.
Great to see you, my friend. I'm glad we made it back here.
Should we do next Tuesday?
I'll see you next Tuesday.
Can't wait.
Love you, bro.
Love you too. Bye, guys.
Bye.